According to clinical neurofinance studies, watching a green candlestick on a trading app triggers the exact same dopamine flood in your brain as pulling a slot machine lever. Meet Tony, Greg, and Ryan. Three 30-year-olds who all want the exact same thing. They want to turn the stock market into real generational wealth. But over the next 30 years, one of these men is going to unknowingly turn his own brain into a casino, working 60,000 extra hours just to lose over $1 million to the quietest, laziest guy in the room. This is not a story about luck. It is about a silent biological trap. And it is about a mathematical reality that Wall Street is terrified you might figure out. Let us keep this completely fair and set the baseline perfectly flat. No trust funds, no hidden advantages, no lucky inheritances. Tony, Greg, and Ryan are all exactly 30 years old. They live in the same city, face the exact same cost of living, and they are in the same tax bracket. They each earn a salary of $75,000 a year, and they all share the exact same financial goal. They want to build real wealth in a regular brokerage account and retire comfortably at age 60. To do this, they each commit to putting exactly $1,000 into the stock market every single month for 30 straight years. The money going in is exactly the same. The only thing that is different is what they decide to do with it once it gets there. Tony decides he is going to outsmart the market. He believes that building wealth requires intense, relentless effort. He learns to read complex charts, he studies candlestick patterns, and he memorizes technical indicators. Every morning, long before the opening bell rings, he is at his desk. He buys and sells on the same day. He hunts for momentum. He jumps in and out of positions over and over again. He executes hundreds of trades a year. To Tony, sitting still and doing nothing feels incredibly irresponsible. It feels like leaving money on the table. Greg takes the slightly calmer version of this exact same idea. He is a swing trader. He does not want the hyper-anxiety of day trading, so he holds his positions for a few days, sometimes a few weeks. He rides a macroeconomic trend until he feels it is running out of steam. Then he moves his money to the next big idea. He is not glued to a multi-monitor setup all day like Tony, but he is still checking his charts most evenings, reading the news, and trading several times a month. And then there is Ryan. Ryan does something that barely looks like an investment strategy at all. He buys one low-cost S&P 500 index fund. He is essentially purchasing a tiny slice of the entire United States stock market. He does this in a single transaction every month for $1,000. He does not pick individual stocks. He does not care what the Federal Reserve is doing. He does not read charts. He buys his index fund, and he literally closes the app. At the weekend barbecue, Tony has the most incredible stories about his fast-paced wins. Greg has deep, analytical opinions about where the global economy is heading. Ryan has absolutely nothing to say. Saying "I bought the index fund again" is not a conversation starter. But feelings and math are two very different things. Over the next 30 years, the quiet one is about to expose everything the other two men believe to be true. For the first couple of years, Tony looks like an absolute genius. He hits a massive hot streak. There are weeks where his portfolio is up 4% while Greg and Ryan are completely flat. He screenshots his best days and sends them to the group chat. He talks constantly about being green on the month, about having found a secret edge, about how he is actually taking control of his destiny, while his friends just sit there waiting for the market to hand them scraps. The wins feel like undeniable proof. Every good trade confirms the story he is telling himself. His brain releases massive hits of dopamine, cementing the neural pathways that equate frantic trading with success. Meanwhile, Greg is doing fine, quietly. A few of his swing trades work out beautifully. A few do not, and he is roughly keeping pace with the market. And Ryan? There is absolutely nothing happening on Ryan's screen. Just a boring number that ticks up a little bit, drifts down a little bit, and steadily, almost invisibly, grinds higher. No drama, no screenshots, no adrenaline. On the only scoreboard Tony ever bothers to look at, which is this week versus last week, he is winning by a mile, and then Tony has the year that convinces him he is right about absolutely everything. A couple of years into this journey, the market runs incredibly hot. His setups align perfectly, his momentum indicators flash green, and he posts a monster 12 months of returns. He beats Greg, he beats Ryan, he beats the overall market itself. For one glorious, undeniable stretch, Tony is unambiguously the smartest guy in the group chat. He pulls out a spreadsheet and starts doing the math on quitting his day job. He looks at what it would take to trade full-time for a living. This, he decides, is the definitive proof. The strategy works. Then, the calendar flips and the spring after his monster year arrives. And with the spring comes the IRS. This is the first devastating blow, the one that Wall Street trading apps never warn you about. When you hold an investment for more than a year and sell it, the government rewards your patience. Your profit is classified as a long-term capital gain, which is taxed at a much lower preferential rate. But when you buy and sell a stock inside of a single year, which is essentially every single trade Tony ever makes, the IRS views you very differently. That profit is classified as a short-term capital gain, and it is taxed as ordinary income. It is taxed at the exact same high rate as your regular paycheck. For Tony, earning $75,000 a year, that means a 22% tax bracket at the federal level. This is before his specific state even takes a single cent. Every winning trade he closes hands roughly a fifth of his hard-earned gains straight to the government in that exact same year. By the time the dust settles and his taxes are paid, a massive chunk of his record-breaking year has handed itself back. Half of what he lost went to bad trades, and the other half went to the taxman. The money he paid in taxes is money that is now permanently gone. It can never be reinvested. It can never compound. The great year he had was not the beginning of his financial empire. It was the absolute high point. Tony just does not know that yet. His brain is already chasing the dopamine of the next trade. That one neurological belief that the single good year is repeatable is exactly what keeps him chained to his chair for the next 28 years. But taxes are only the most visible enemy. There is a second, entirely invisible force bleeding Tony's account dry, and it is called friction. Every time Tony places a trade, it carries a tiny cost. There is the spread between the buy price and the sell price. There is the occasional platform fee, and there is slippage, which is when the price of a stock moves a fraction of a penny before his order actually fills. On any single trade, this friction is microscopic. It is just a few cents. It is entirely unnoticeable. But a day trader does not make one trade. Tony churns his entire account balance over and over again. He easily turns his money over 20 times its total value in a single calendar year. Even at 0.1% per round trip, turning his account over 20 times means roughly 2% of his total money quietly evaporates into the pockets of high-frequency trading firms and market makers every single year. This money disappears before he has made a single dollar of actual profit. This friction isn't just an unfortunate side effect. It is a mathematical certainty. The market does not actually have to beat Tony. His own hyperactive trading does the job for free. If you think Tony is just an unfortunate outlier, let us look at the reality of the data. This is not an opinion. This is backed by some of the most thorough, heavily researched data in all of modern finance. A landmark, peer-reviewed study tracked every single day trader in an entire country's stock market over a span of more than a decade. It found a terrifying reality. Fewer than 1% of active day traders earned reliable, predictable profits after accounting for costs. A massive separate study found that more than 8 out of 10 day traders simply lose money. Research conducted on the Brazilian equity markets found that 97% of individuals who day traded for more than 300 days walked away with negative balances. And a famous, long-standing study of retail investors in the United States found that the most active traders systematically underperformed the broader market by about 6.5 percentage points every single year. Not just once. Every year. But I am going to be incredibly generous to Tony today. For the rest of this entire timeline, we are going to assume Tony is actually a unicorn. We are going to assume he is better than 80% of all day traders on Earth. We are going to pretend he is one of the rare ones who actually makes a profit. Keep that in mind, because even the most optimistic, generous version of Tony's story does not end the way he thinks it does. Now, let's look at Greg. Greg looks at the frantic chaos of day trading and feels incredibly safe. He is not making hundreds of rapid-fire trades. He holds his positions for days or weeks. Surely his calmer, more measured version of trading is the intelligent path. It is definitely calmer, but it is still not winning. Because Greg trades far less frequently than Tony, two things genuinely do improve. His friction costs are drastically lower because he is making a fraction of the total trades. And his mental health is better because he is not chained to a glowing monitor all day long. Those are real, tangible advantages. But the two most destructive problems do not disappear for Greg. They just shrink slightly. Greg is still holding almost every single one of his winning positions for less than a year, which means almost every single time he takes a profit, he triggers a short-term capital gain. He is still getting hit with that exact same 22% ordinary income tax rate every single year it happens. He is bleeding slower than Tony, but he is still bleeding. Furthermore, Greg is still attempting to time the market. He is still trying to decide exactly when to get in, exactly when to get out, trying to guess which macroeconomic trend is real and which one is a trap. The historical data on market timing is just as unforgiving for swing traders as it is for day traders. Most intelligent people who try to time the market consistently underperform the profoundly boring person who simply stayed invested. Greg occupies the middle ground. He is the cautionary tale that desperately looks like a responsible strategy. So why does Ryan, the man who does absolutely nothing, keep pulling ahead? Ryan wins on three specific mathematical fronts. First, he wins on taxes. Because Ryan almost never sells his index fund, he almost never triggers a taxable event. His money sits there, untouched, compounding upon itself for 30 straight years. While Tony and Greg are forced to hand over a massive cut of their wealth to the government every single April, Ryan keeps all of his. Deferred tax is not a small, negligible benefit. It is decades of extra, explosive compounding on money that would otherwise have been confiscated. Second, he wins on cost. Ryan buys one profoundly boring index fund that charges essentially zero fees. He automatically owns a tiny piece of the 500 largest, most profitable companies in America. He suffers no bid-ask spreads. He suffers no algorithmic slippage. He has no friction leaking value from his future. And third, he wins on the undeniable historical record. According to Standard & Poor's own long-running data, roughly 9 out of 10 professional fund managers, the guys who do this full-time, with Ivy League degrees, massive teams of analysts, and software tools Tony could never dream of affording, fail to beat a simple S&P 500 index over a 15-year period. If the absolute smartest professionals on Wall Street cannot reliably beat the index, the mathematical probability of Tony doing it from his spare bedroom is basically zero. Ryan is boring, he is lazy, he is uninteresting at parties, but his strategy is brutally, relentlessly effective. Let us run the clock and watch the compounding scale. This is where the human brain struggles to comprehend the math. For the first few years, the three of them look incredibly close. The gap opens up so quietly that nobody can even tell it is happening. By year 5, Tony's day trading account is sitting at around $63,000. Greg's swing trading account is at about $68,000. Ryan's index fund is at roughly $75,000. It is close. Tony still has the best screenshots, so to him it feels like a tie at worst. But by year 10, the lines on the chart have permanently separated. Tony is sitting at roughly $134,000. Greg is at $154,000. Ryan has reached $192,000. Tony is now almost $60,000 behind the guy who literally never opens his brokerage app. And Tony has absolutely no idea, because he is only comparing himself to his own performance last month. He is not comparing himself to Ryan. By year 15, the math starts to get aggressive. Tony has $213,000. Greg has $264,000. Ryan is holding $373,000. By year 20, the separation is staggering. Tony has $302,000. Ryan has $656,000. The man who spends 4 minutes a year managing his money now has more than double the wealth of the hardest worker in the room. By year 25, the gap turns violent. Tony has just crossed the $400,000 mark. Ryan is sitting on approximately $1,095,000. The man who never tried to time a single trend now has nearly $700,000 more than the man who watched the market every single day. And there are still 5 years left to run. Writer's compound interest is about to do the heaviest lifting of its entire existence in the final stretch. 30 years in, the experiment is over. All three men are exactly 60 years old. All three men put in exactly the same amount of money out of their paychecks. $360,000 in total principal, $1,000 a month for 360 months. Here is the final reality. Tony, the day trader who treated the stock market like a high-stakes second career, lands at about $511,000. Greg, the swing trader who played it somewhat calmer, finishes with about $812,000. And Ryan, the man who bought a single index fund and refused to play the game, retires with $1,778,000. Ryan finishes with more than 3 times the wealth that Tony managed to build. He is more than $1.2 million ahead of him. And remember, this is the highly generous, optimistic version of Tony. This is the version where Tony actually survived and made a profit. The typical day trader in the real world does not land at $500,000. The typical day trader lands completely underwater, with their initial capital destroyed. Tony did not lose this race because he was unintelligent. He lost because three invisible forces ran against him every single day for 3 decades. The tax on every single short-term win, the algorithmic friction of every single trade, and the statistical gravity that dictates almost nobody beats the market long-term. None of these forces felt like a catastrophic loss in any given week, but over 30 years, they added up to well over $1 million that he will never, ever get back. If I stopped the story right here, it would already be a tragedy. But there is one final cost in Tony's equation, and it is the most devastating metric of all because it is measured in the one currency Tony can never print more of. Time. We have measured this entire journey in dollars. Now, let's line it up in hours. Tony watched the market for the majority of the day, almost every single trading day. He woke up early to prep his charts, and he stayed up late to review his losses. Call it roughly 2,000 hours a year of intense, stressful focus. Over a 30-year span, that equates to 60,000 hours. 60,000 hours of his one singular life on this planet. That is the mathematical equivalent of working a second, exhausting, full-time career for 3 decades straight. Greg, the swing trader, spent far less time, but it still was not free. A few hundred hours a year reading macroeconomic news, watching charts and managing entry points. Over 30 years, he spent somewhere around 10,000 hours. That is 2.5 full working years of his life, gone. Ryan spent approximately 4 hours a year. Just a few minutes each month to make his automated purchase, and an occasional, casual glance at his balance. Over the entire 30-year span, Ryan spent roughly 120 hours. That is about 3 working weeks, total, for his entire life. Look at the final scoreboard. The man who sacrificed 60,000 hours of his youth, who missed family dinners, who carried the anxiety of red days in his chest, who effectively worked a second career for free, finished dead last. The man who spent 3 weeks of effort finished first, with over $1 million more in the bank. Tony did not just lose money chasing the dopamine of the market. He literally paid $1 million for the privilege of losing 60,000 hours of his life. That is the real bill, and no explosive return in any single year can ever buy those hours back. So, what actually works? How do you survive the psychology of the market? The real answer is the one nobody on the internet is aggressively marketing to you because there is no expensive masterclass to sell with it. Step 1. You must build your core wealth in broad, low-cost index funds during your working years. This is where the math wins, ruthlessly and flatly. You get lower taxes, zero friction, massive diversification, and a historical compounding record that the most brilliant professionals cannot defeat. This is the boring engine, and it is the only engine proven to safely get you to that $1.7 million finish line. 95% of your money, maybe even all of it, belongs right here. Step 2. If the urge to trade is biological, if your brain genuinely craves the dopamine of the action, do not pretend the urge does not exist. Wall it off. Take a very small slice of money that you can completely afford to set on fire, absolutely no more than 5% of your total portfolio, and let that be your casino. Trade it, scratch the itch, have fun. But ideally, keep it inside a tax-advantaged account like a Roth IRA so that your inevitable short-term wins do not trigger immediate tax bills that compound the damage. The other 95% stays completely boring. The point is not to never have fun. The point is to make sure your fun never, ever touches your future. Step 3. Be brutally honest about your own scoreboard. If you are going to trade, measure your returns against what a simple index fund did over that exact same timeline. Do not measure it against your best week, and count the hours of your life as a real, tangible cost because they are. If you are putting in hundreds of agonizing hours a year just to underperform an index fund that you could have bought while waiting in line for coffee, you do not have a hobby. You have an incredibly stressful, unpaid job that you are literally paying to do. The trap for Tony was never the act of trading itself. The trap was mistaking chaotic activity for actual progress. Tony felt like he was winning every single week. His brain rewarded him with all the right chemicals, and that feeling cost him a literal fortune and a second lifetime of hours. The market does not pay you for your effort. It does not care how hard you studied the chart. For most people, most of the time, the market only pays you for your patience. Now, all 3 of these men attempted to spread their money across the market or trade the trends. But what if one of them had completely skipped the trading, ignored the index funds, and just bought a single, phenomenal company 30 years ago and simply refused to sell it? Imagine buying one specific tech stock back in 1995 and then forgetting you even owned it. The math that comes back from that equation might be the most terrifying psychological shock of all. But that is a completely different story, and we will decode that math in the next video.